talked about basic concepts of editing, and we're going to go into what is known as the creative role of the editor. But before that, do you have any questions with regard to the last episode?
I wanted to ask whether there are any directors who use very few cuts in his films, like reducing the editing to the minimum.
First kind of, well, sort of experiment was done by Alfred Hitchcock himself, the master of suspense. And he made a film called Rope. And he wanted to give the impression that the entire film was taken in one shot, meaning that there would be no cuts. But actually there were cuts for two reasons. One is that each reel in those days was about 1,000 feet, or at most 2,000 feet. You couldn't shoot for more than 1,000 feet, so there had to be a cut, because after 1,000 feet the camera would stop. So how did Hitchcock surmount this problem? He would move the camera into very dark spaces at the end of the reel, and then cut to a dark space, and then it would emerge. You didn't feel the cut. The cut was masked, but there were cuts, but very few. If it was a 15-reel film, there'd probably be 14 cuts or something like that. But there is another more important filmmaker, in my opinion, called Miklos Jancsó, Jancso, Miklos Jancsó, Hungarian. And he uses a minimum of cuts because his films are basically dependent on the mise-en-scène technique. What he does is, he is basically choreographing his sequences. The camera moves in a balletic fashion. The characters move. There are so many elements. And let's say a film like Electra, one of Miklos Jancsó's films, or Allegro Barbaro. All of these have very few shots. Each of them are sequences, and the entire sequence is composed in a single shot. He believes that the oppressor and the oppressed come from the same historical circumstance, and therefore he believes in moving the camera a lot. There are many such other directors who move the camera a lot and take long takes, like Max Ophuls, Franju, and others. But generally, yes, Andrei Tarkovsky uses the long take, but he also uses the cut. He's not like Jancsó in the sense that he would compose a huge sequence with a single shot. But sometimes, because he believes in psychological probing, or maybe a philosophic, metaphysical construct, he might use a shot which lingers on for a long time. There's a difference between a shot lingering on for a long time and an entire sequence being taken in a single shot. What we're going to talk about now is something very crucial, and that is the creative role of the director. And within this, we will take up certain subjects like creative decisions. Who makes these creative decisions? Is it the editor or the director? How much of responsibility does the director have, and how much does the editor have? Is there really something creative to do in editing, or is it all determined at the script stage? Things like these will be discussed. Though these are ethical questions, they're aesthetic questions also. Now let me ask you, do you believe, now think about it carefully, that an editor really has an independent role to play in cinema? Tell me, Nivedita.
Because he's the one at the end who puts the entire film together in his own way.
Correct. Here another point is the director is so involved with his materials that he cannot always give a very objective view. It's the editor who can provide the outside impression, cut it mercilessly. We should not be fascinated by our shots. You might have taken a very beautiful shot, a crane shot, or a track shot, or some very beautiful colors, or a very emotional scene. But you must know when to cut, because finally you will be doing your film harm if you become self-indulgent. It is the editor who is that voice of reason. Also, I believe that the director must give the editor some creative freedom. There might be things which the director has not thought of at all. It's the editor who can bring those things to the fore. Maybe an insert somewhere. What is an insert? Tell me.
Particular scene which has been omitted by the director can be...
An insert is a particular shot which is inserted into the dialogue of someone else's, For example, you are speaking. Your shot is on the screen, and I put in my insert. I'm listening to you. So the decision of putting the insert will mean that you will not remain on the screen, but your voice will remain. This decision can be provided by the editor. The director might feel that as long as you are speaking, you should be on the screen. But maybe it will work better if you give me a little bit of footage so that it indicates that I'm listening to you. Your words will have more impact. You must realize that just because you remain on the screen for a long time doesn't mean you have the maximum impact. In fact, it could be the opposite. If a character is shown all the time on the screen, then the image wears thin. Sometimes you would like to show the character from the back or from the side or not at all. And then when he appears, he comes in with some impact. These decisions can often be provided by the editor. But the editor must work in conjunction with the director, because the script has been approved by the director, sometimes written by the director. It's a director who knows the entire story, and he can certainly provide certain insights to the editor, who can then create on the basis of that. This is important. So it's a role which is a collaborative role. The two of them work together. This is important. Can there be debates? Is an important question. Yes. There can be arguments. The director and the editor may not agree. A third person may be brought in to mediate. Or finally, usually, the director has his way. He could finally say that, no, I think this is what this is what needs to be done, and the editor will agree. Or he may concede to the editor and say, no, what you're saying is right. The film is looking better because of this. To give you an example, Ray writes in his Pather Panchali again that his cameraman was a very famous cameraman. Do you know the cameraman of Pather Panchali?
Shubhrata Mitra.
Correct. Shubhrata Mitra, who was doing his first film, as was Ray. The only one in the unit who had prior film experience was Bongshi Chandragupta. Shubhrata had shot some very beautiful shots. You know that they started the film in 1950 with a 16 camera, and then the film went on and on. In 1955, it was finally completed because they got a grant from the West Bengal government on what is known as the Road Development Fund, which is ridiculous because it was Pather Panchali, the song of the little road. But during the process, they shot and edited and re-edited. Some very beautiful shots were taken by Shubhrata, and Ray was the first to acknowledge that these were very beautiful shots. But there was no place for them in the film. Can you tell me why?
Because it doesn't go with the narration.
Correct. The script doesn't demand those shots. They are beautiful in themselves. But by putting them in, you will be distracting the viewer, meandering away from the story, and the focus will be lost. Don't just put in a beautiful shot because it is beautiful. This is one principle of editing which you must follow. See the function of the shot. Is it relevant? Does it enhance, the prospects of the film's communication? Does it take the story forward? These are questions which the editor must ask himself. And that is why the editor has definitely a very creative contribution. Some directors believe in what is known as coverage. Note this word, coverage. Coverage means shooting from several angles. I had the opportunity to watch the shooting of City of Joy. I have also myself acted in several films made by BBC and by foreign production units. I acted in a film called The Peacock Spring, which was directed by a gentleman called Chris Morahan, who had earlier done Jewel in the Crown. Now, in my observation of these films, particularly City of Joy, I found that they use coverage. That is, they cover the same shot from several angles. Now, there's something to be said in favor of this, something to be said against this. You cover the action from several angles, from a long shot, from a medium shot, from a close shot, from a top angle, use a crane, use a trolley, and give the entire material to the editor. What does the editor do with this coverage?
He decides.
He decides, he selects. He takes the decision of using a particular shot up to a certain point and then can go into the next shot. What is the advantage of this coverage? The great advantage?
The editor can take his own opinion.
Yes, the editor has a lot of options. I had introduced a few semiological terms in the first lecture. I'm introducing another one. I want to introduce the term paradigm. A paradigm is different from a syntagma, syntagma. In a paradigm, you have several options. I could have taken this shot. I could have also taken this shot. I have taken this shot. I have also taken this shot, but only one of these two shots will be used. So the shots in the paradigm bear a paradigmatic relationship with each other. Potential shots which can be used, they're all in the paradigm. So what goes in place of what is in the paradigm. And what goes after what or what goes before what is syntagma. The syntagma tells you the sequence of the shots. So a shot preceding has a syntagmatic relationship with a shot following. Whereas a shot which is taken has a paradigmatic relationship with a shot which was not taken but which could have been taken. It was within the paradigm. Right? Now, because of this coverage, in the paradigm, you have several shots. High angle shots, low angle shots, close shots, medium shots, long shots. And you can take decisions. The entire action is covered. For example, this is a program that we're doing on television, and you have several cameras. They're covering the same action from different angles. And although we are doing instantaneous editing, we could have done post-production editing also, provided all these materials shot by the camera is stored or recorded in a VTR. So coverage gives you this advantage. But there is a problem with coverage also. Tell me, this is the pro side of coverage. What is the con side of coverage?
You have to take that coverage. You can't think beyond this.
No, that in any case you'll have a problem with. You can't in any case think beyond.
The director does not have any opinion in that coverage.
That's very good, Budhaditya. You have made a very correct statement. Does not the director have a very clear idea in his mind as what he wants to do? This is not documentary. For example, in a sequence from Par, the final sequence in which Shabana Azmi, that Naurangia character, along with his wife, they have to swim across a river with a whole lot of pigs. Now, this is a very difficult shot, and Gautam Ghosh had to use two cameras and cover the whole action. Or in a documentary, you know, President Clinton's come and you have to cover it. In that case, use coverage. But if you have a clear screenplay, a clear mise-en-scène, and a very clear shot breakdown, you should know that after the track shot, you're going to go to a close-up and then move to the crane and then go to another close-up. The moment you take coverage, you are not very sure about your action. You've given the entire material to the editor to decide. So this is a problem. So there's pro and con. The European directors don't believe in coverage. You know, people like Antonioni, you see his La Notte, you can feel that it's very beautifully structured. The shot breakdown is carefully done. But say a Roland Joffe in City of Joys uses a lot of coverage. There are other directors who use coverage in certain cases and don't use coverage in other cases. So in any case, if you have coverage, it becomes very creative for the editor. He has a lot of material and he can manipulate the material, play with the material. Right? Now the next creative area for the editor is sound. Sound editing is now a whole discipline by itself. But basically, the introduction of sound makes it very creative for the editor. How is it creative? Can you give certain ideas?
Basically, you do have to add certain sounds which was not taken up during the shooting.
The editor certainly can give the director clues regarding certain sounds which were not there in the shooting, which were not thought of, but which could lend a certain edge to the narrative. But before understanding the creative use of sound by the editor, let's try and divide the different kinds of sounds that we could think of. Now, basically, there's dialogue, That's the basic, very simple kind of sound. And there's music. And music could be of varying kinds. We'll come to that later. Then there are sound effects. Now, sound effects is a rather dull rubric. It includes different kinds of sound effects. First of all, I'd call them diegetic sound effects. Diegetic. Can you tell me what is the meaning of the word diegesis? Diegesis, semiologically, is the sum total of all denotation. It is also the story space. That is not only that which is shown, but also that which is implied by that which is shown. Now, there are diegetic sounds, sounds that are directly related to the story. But there could be non-diegetic sounds also. Can you give me an example of a non-diegetic sound? A sound that is not directly related to the story space.
Maybe when in all films, hero and heroines, maybe they are singing, but there is background music, some kind of.
That's excellent. Music itself is non-diegetic. Any kind of music, not only the song. Any music which comes is not directly related to the story space. It emphasizes the scene or it counterpoints the scene. That's non-diegetic. Another example of a non-diegetic sound is a voice-over or a commentary. For example, in Basu Chatterjee's Choti Si Baat, there's a commentary at the beginning. In Shatranj Ki Khiladi, Amitabh Bachchan gives a commentary in the beginning, talking about, the British. In Lagan 2, in Bhuvan Shom, again Amitabh Bachchan gives a commentary at the beginning. So commentary, voiceovers can be non-diegetic. So there are sounds which are related to the action and sounds which are not. There are some sounds which can begin as non-diegetic and suddenly become diegetic. For example, if you look at Fellini's 8.5, have you seen this film? We all seen it? Only you've seen it. Meghdut, have you seen it? You must see the entire film. This is very important from an editing point of view. In that, there is a spa. A spa is a kind of, a resort where, health resort where people get well. You'll find music, and that music seems non-diegetic. Then gradually you see that there's an orchestra playing. So the non-diegetic has become diegetic when you see it. So there's a lot of play between diegetic and non-diegetic. So the decision of what sound to play, when it would be diegetic and when not, is often taken by the editor. Now, among the sound effects, there's the dialogue, music which is non-diegetic, but it could also be diegetic if, say, a classical musician like Rashid Khan sings a song, and in here Birju Maharaj's song in Shatranj Ki Khiladi, those you actually see the performer, so it becomes diegetic. There is what is known as psychological sound, which is again non-diegetic, but it comments. For example, the whiplash in Hrithik Ghatak's Meghi Taka Tara is a psychological sound. That is, the conscience is being whipped. Inside a room, in my film Shunno Theke Shuru, I've used the sound of waves. There are no waves there. But the man is suffering from a psychic disability. He's not lost his mind, but his mind has been short-circuited. He's an intellectual. So his economic theories, his postmodern philosophies, his Naxalite background, they've all got short-circuited. And in Shunno Theke Shuru, you find wave sounds. These are psychological sounds. There are sync sounds, synchronized sounds. We also use the word Foley, F-O-L-E-Y. Give me some more examples of sync sounds, very quickly. I want 5 examples right now, and then we'll move to the next part of the subject.
In any film, there may be writing.
And the sound of the pen on the paper. Yes, one more example.
Another thing that you're talking in this program is the sync sound.
No, that's a dialogue. I'm not asking about dialogue. Something apart from dialogue.
Somebody sitting in front of a sea and the waves of the sea.
Okay, the waves of the sea. What else?
Someone opening a cupboard or closing a cupboard.
This is more of a sync sound than the waves of the sea, because the waves of the sea are not an exact sync. You can always, add the waves and you cannot tell. But opening a cupboard door, opening a car door, closing a car door is an exact sync sound. Give me something else.
The drop of water dropping.
Drops of water, scraping of a chair, footsteps, closing a door, going up there, all these sounds. It could be two things. One, that the entire soundtrack could be sync sound, like in Lagan. No dubbing. The effects are also there. Or if you have dubbing of the dialogue, you'll have to recreate all the sounds, and that's in the domain of the sound person, not in the domain of the editor. But each and every sound will have to be recreated. So psychological sounds, synchronized sounds, non-sync sounds. These would come under non-sync sound. Waves, traffic, birds chirping, things like that. Those are non-sync sounds. So the editor has a creative role in deciding what sound would go where, in the sense that it enhances the story, it creates a psychological impact. He'd also decide where the music would go in exactly. In Pother Panchali, Oporajito, Opur Songshor, and indeed all of Satyajit Ray's films, Ray doesn't use the music always where you expect it, Where there's a drama, like in a jatra, he doesn't play the music. He might play it a little late, or he might play it a little early and stop the music. Look at that marvelous sequence in Pother Panchali after Durga's death, when Horihor has come back, and he sees his devastated house, and he sees that no one is there, and he's calling for Shorbojaya, for Durga. He's calling for Opu, and then finally Shorbojaya comes silently, and no words are exchanged, and then he starts taking out the presents, and he gives her a present. He says, "This is for Durga." And then suddenly Shorbojaya breaks down. You don't hear the human voice. You hear the tar shanai playing a rag. So the mechanical voice has taken over the human voice, and that decision, that edit decision to place the music there, imbues that feeling with that moment with great feeling. And it brings tears to our eyes. So that decision has to be taken by the editor. The editor has a very important creative role in the realm of sound. Now the next area is smoothness. We'll go into this in the next episode also, but I'll try to begin. How does the editor bring in smoothness to a film? Now there are some editors who want this smoothness, and there are some who don't want this smoothness. Maybe Jean-Luc Godard doesn't want smoothness in his editing. Maybe an Eisenstein doesn't want smoothness. He wants emphatic editing. He wants you to notice the shots. But say a Hollywood director like Frank Capra, like say Billy Wilder, like William Wyler, Preston Sturges, and all those Hollywood great directors might want this smoothness. How do you think this smoothness can be achieved? There are several ways. We've already spoken of the match cut. Use of the match cut smoothens the cut. The idea is to hide your art. As I said, art lies in concealing art. There's no emphatic editing. You hide the editing process. And therefore, you should see, first of all, that there are no jerks of any kind. In this, continuity plays a very important role. The editor must be very conscious about continuity. Obviously, the director has to be conscious. He should see that the light continuity, the costume continuity, the action continuity matches. Can you tell me what is action continuity?
In one shot, when you see an individual exiting from the frame, and the next frame you see that he's entering from the right side.
Action continuity is that while I am interacting and talking, I will involve in certain actions, involve myself. I might pick up this mobile. When did I pick it up? I might pick up this mobile. So when I said pick, I picked up the mobile. I might look at this CD. When I said look, I placed my hand. If I pick it up, I might pick up this mobile. This is wrong. I must pick up this mobile. I must pick up this mobile is wrong. Tell me why? You didn't get it. Can you tell me? I'll repeat it again. It's very important. I'm saying, I must pick up this mobile. This is right. I must pick up this mobile. This is wrong.
You're not doing it at the same time.
Correct. I must pick it up at the time of pick. If I pick it up at the time of mobile, I spoil the action continuity. So the action continuity is using the same action at the time of saying the dialogue, doing the same action again with the same hand. It's very difficult. It has to be done correctly. Unless you have a multi-camera setup like this and you go for continuous taking, But in film, we don't do that. In video, we do that sometimes. But even in video, we often use single camera setups. So action continuity has to be maintained not only by the director who takes, but also by the editor who must see to it that it should be cut properly. If there is a mistake in continuity and he cuts it, it will be an editorial fault. So the continuity has to be maintained. Match cuts have to be done, executed perfectly. Smoothness comes from lack of jerks. There should be no jerks of any kind. Therefore, the camera angle should have changed sufficiently, 30 degrees. The magnification should have changed. And there must be a smooth flow. The unobtrusive editor, the man who believes in invisible editing, must maintain this smooth flow. It's very important to maintain the flow. Execute it perfectly. Smoothness comes from lack of jerks. There should be no jerks of any kind. Therefore, the camera angle should have changed sufficiently, 30 degrees. The magnification should have changed. And there must be a smooth flow. The unobtrusive editor, the man who believes in invisible editing, must maintain this smooth flow. It's very important to maintain the flow. And only then can he get smoothness. But you must remember that different editors have different editing styles. Like Citizen Kane was edited by Robert Wise, who later went on to become a famous director. He directed Sound of Music and jointly directed West Side Story with Jerome Robbins. But he's a famous editor, Robert Wise. So he has a style of his own. Satyajit Ray's editor was Dulal Dotto. He has a style of his own. It's a different kind of it. Rishikesh Mukherjee himself was a very famous editor. He has a style of his own. So different editors have different styles. Maintaining the style is important, but maintaining smoothness is equally important. We'll go more into this in detail in the next episode, but remember that the creative role of the editor extends to the sound, to maintaining of smoothness, to the way the shot breakdown is perceived and executed, and in the way he displays his style. He has to maintain a proper pace, a proper time, and a proper rhythm. We'll go into pacing, timing, and rhythm in the next episode. So for now, that's all. Think about what questions you want to ask me in the next episode. Thank you.